Mohammed from Williamsville started at Geico in 2007. 10 promotions later, he's a high-level manager in the claims department.
When I first came to Geico, I thought to myself, just a job, and I'll look for my career in my business management. And then I just kept getting promoted one after another, and I just realized that this could be my career. And obviously it is. There's a pretty good map on how to become a supervisor, on how to become a manager, on how to become whatever you would like to become.
Apply online at geico.jobs/Buffalo.
If you have been sexually assaulted, the sooner you seek care, the better. Visit safe.suny.edu to learn more.
Hello and welcome. It is Eric Erickson here. Delighted to have you with me. It is Friday, August 13th, and if you're in the southeast, you've got a tropical storm headed your way. You stay with your local radio station for weather reports as it comes through Saturday and Sunday through Florida into Monday, Tuesday into Alabama, Georgia, North Carolina, Tennessee. Just pay attention to it. Keep an eye on it. Now, we got a lot of people who want to spend some time talking about the Afghan withdrawal. I spent the first hour on it, and I am happy to do that. But I want to spend a few moments before I get back there to the census data, because the census data is extremely important. You need to understand it. And it's not quite what the media would have you believe. If you read media reports about the 2020 census data, what you will find is that the nation's rural parts are shrinking in population and urban parts are growing, but overall the country's population is not growing that much. And the country's population, to the extent it's growing, is overwhelmingly non-white and immigrant. The media, you need to understand that, and I had to research this way back when for a report I wrote when I was in college. Or was it law school? Now I can't even remember. What I do remember is that in 1972, the Richard Nixon reelection was when the media first latched onto the idea that demography was destiny. And at the time, it was not immigrant population, it was African-American population. As more black people were born in this country, the Republican Party would be reduced and eventually eliminated. It has been a matter of media dogma since the mid-'70s that as the white population of this country shrank, the Republican Party's chances of ever winning would go away unless they adopted a slate of liberal policies and became essentially the Democratic Party. Now, the problem with this is that it's not actually so. The problem with this is that the media dogmatically, and it is a level of dogma, the media level of dogma here is that there's no future for the GOP. The media has been willfully hoping to get rid of the GOP for some time, and the latest census data, with a long line of census data, shows we're a majority minority country, or we're almost there. White people are fading away. In fact, you've got headlines around the country, like, for example, Atlanta, Georgia, where I am, that it is now a majority minority urban area. And the Republican Party is going to collapse because it can't attract non-white voters, except that ignores 2020. And it ignores something even more important that doesn't get talked about. Now, the reason it doesn't get talked about is because the media itself does not understand what it's dealing with. The media itself genuinely doesn't understand the nature of the demographic shift, in large part because so much of the media in this country parrots Democratic talking points. And there is there's a book, It is, what is it? Teixeira, Roy Teixeira. That's it. He writes for the Center for American Progress, and Roy Teixeira has essentially become the demographic prognosticator that the media loves. He's written a number of books on red states and blue states and the emerging Democratic majority. It got a lot of attention back in 2002. And essentially his claims are that as the United States becomes non-white, conservatives fade and Republicans fade, and the media has gravitated towards it ever since. And they embrace this willfully over time. And you hear that, we're going to become more inclusive and more progressive as a result. But it's not really true. I want to read you, and I'll keep his name out of it. He wouldn't want me to bring his name into it. He doesn't mind me reading these things, but I want to read you what a friend of mine sent me. Demography news is always interesting and, just as always, poorly reported. The flurry of news stories across the past 24 hours on the 2020 census outcomes are case in point. The narrative throughout is the same in each. People of color are on the rise. Whites are on decline. But the people of color, it's always the phrase they use, or nearly always the phrase they use, primarily responsible for the change are Hispanics. And here's where it gets complicated. You know what? I don't have to read what he says because he and I think along the same lines here. You know what Hispanic is? Hispanic is not a race. Hispanic is not a race. It's an ethnicity. If you are political, if you're a partisan, you'll say Latino. If you are a nutcase, you will say Latinx. But it's Hispanic culture. Hispanic voters overwhelmingly say they prefer to use Hispanic, even as white academics use Latino. But Hispanic voters are not a race. Hispanic voters are Venezuelan, they're Argentinian, they're Nicaraguan, they're Guatemalan, they're Honduran, El Salvadorian, Mexican, Costa Rican, Bolivian, Peruvian, Chilean, Argentinian. They're not a race. They're an ethnic group of people. And guess what? Guess what the data shows? Most of them view themselves as white people. White people. In fact, in 2020, Donald Trump won South Texas Mexican Americans and Florida Hispanics. He overperformed, I guess I should say, in many counties in South Colorado, the most Hispanic counties in South Colorado. Donald Trump won them. He was the first Republican since George W. Bush to win those counties. In South Texas, Donald Trump made massive inroads with Hispanic voters. The Republicans themselves did. The Republican Party, not just Trump, Republicans did. If demography were destiny, I'm reading from my friend's email again. If demography were destiny, what demographic change would actually most likely guarantee a democratic future? It's not a majority non-white America packed with people who believe in God, two sexes, family, roots, and big pickup trucks. It would be an America run by and for upper-income whites, non-religious, childless, and rootless, like the one we have now. And that's ultimately it. And that's what you have to understand here. As our country grows more Hispanic, it will grow more conservative. And the Democrats don't believe that because the loudest Hispanic voices in the country that the Democrats and the media have elevated onto the national landscape for punditry and talking head class, they are progressive. But your average Hispanic immigrant to this country is not. And your average Hispanic immigrant to this country, the longer they stay here, identifies as white. I've got a friend of mine who is one of the biggest Democratic consultants in the world. You all know him. I'm going to leave him out of this because he'll get hate mail, both for being a friend of mine and for saying what I'm about to say. He worked for multiple presidents. He's worked around the world. And he says he's never understood why Republicans were so anti-immigrant in his framing. Now, we can argue we're not anti-immigrant, we're anti-illegal immigrant. We want people to follow the law to come here. But in his mind, he warns Democrats all the time. They've got to be careful on this issue. Why? Because the longer an Hispanic family stays in the United States, the more likely they are to identify as white and Republican. You have to get to the third generation of Hispanic immigrant family to see them become more progressive. And even then, not too much. In fact, the most conservative of the Hispanics are the non-Catholic Hispanic. The Protestant Hispanic immigrant to this country is overwhelmingly conservative and considers themselves white. And you know, the whole idea of a white or a black Hispanic is very new. It's the was it George Zimmerman, Trayvon Martin situation, where the shooter was classified as a white Hispanic. Looked Hispanic to me. I didn't realize there was such a thing until then, that the left makes such a big deal out of classified black and white Hispanics. Or now, what's the movie, Lin-Manuel Miranda movie that came out in the Heights or whatever, and it got attacked by the New York Times for not having enough Afro-Latino representation, whatever the hell that is. Apparently it's people from the Dominican Republic, Haiti, and the like, I guess. It's a big deal. Y'all, the average Hispanic voter in this country doesn't view himself as anything other than a white person, and they're conservative. The Democrats so internalized, and again, this started in 1972. It started in 1972 that demography is destiny and the days of the Republican Party are coming to an end. When Richard Nixon rebounded as president, remember Pauline Kael, the New York Times critic, said, "No one she knew voted for Nixon. How could this be?" The elite in this country don't know people who vote Republican or conservative generally. They think because they don't know anyone, clearly the Republicans are the minority, and clearly the data shows as white people become less and less a part of this country, the Democratic Party is on the rise, except Hispanic people tend to view themselves as white. This goes back again to my friend's email here. Lots and lots of Hispanics are and consider themselves to be white. It's well known. Less well known, but possibly driving this outcome, is politicized Hispanics who have dropped a prior white self-identification for a putatively non-white Hispanic one. So bundling in white Hispanics who tend, by the by, to socially and politically behave like non-Hispanic whites in aggregate. What's the actual white population in the United States? We don't actually know. The media is not telling us. But we know that the media is wishfully thinking that because of demographic changes in this country, the days of the Republican Party are at an end, and it's not really true. Did you see what Donald Trump did? Donald Trump lost, not because the election was stolen, I'm sorry. He lost because he lost upper income white people. He held white women, which all the polling said he couldn't do. And the exit polls, the actual counting of how people voted, the exit polls show Donald Trump lost white men. Typically upper income white men who hated Hillary went with Joe Biden. But he made gains with Hispanic voters and young black men. Why? He got them out of jail. He got them jobs. He kept them safe. That's just the reality. And the media continues to ignore that reality at its own peril. And that's really not a bad thing for the future of the GOP, because they'll never see it when the GOP's coming. The phone number here, it's an open line Friday. It's 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. A lot of people still want to talk about the situation in Afghanistan. I do too. We'll take your calls when we come back. This hour of the program brought to you by First Liberty Building and Loan. First Liberty has been doing this since the 1990s, helping big businesses become bigger businesses and small businesses grow. You need access to loans to buy a building, buy a fleet of vehicles, to grow your business. We're talking six figures and above. Go to firstlibertyga.com, firstlibertyga.com. Spend 10 minutes with them. See if they're a good fit for your business. They want to help you, and they've been doing it since the 90s. They know what they're doing. firstlibertyga.com. Let's get back to the phones here this Open Line Friday. 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. Jim, you are going to be up next on the Eric Erickson Show. Welcome.
Well, thanks, Eric. Listen, after ISIS started beheading people in Iraq and Syria, Obama did a a very good 180 by going back into Iraq and stopping leaving Afghanistan. When the beheadings restart in Afghanistan, is Biden going to do another 180 himself? God forbid it happens, but if it does, will he have the strength of character?
I don't think he will,
go back in there?
Jim. Honestly, I think that this is abandoning the ship, and the Biden administration has no desire to go back in. And frankly, what's going to happen is the Chinese are already saying they're going to recognize the Taliban. And if we try to go back into Afghanistan to stop terror planning or whatnot, we're going to deal with the Chinese. The Taliban and the Chinese are perfectly willing to ally together against the United States of America. This is an alliance of the enemy of our enemy is our friend, and they are ready to work together to stop us. It is damnable what the Biden administration is doing, frankly. We may need to withdraw. We have failed at nation building. This goes back to Obama, by the way, who made it very clear he was ready to be done and had no interest in coming up with a long-term game plan. And that's part of the problem. We held the country. We got to the point where we had 2,500 soldiers holding the country, no casualties, 2,500 soldiers holding the country, and we never made a pivot to, okay, what do we do long-term? We never made the pivot. We're bad at nation building to begin with, and we made it worse with our failure to plan. Speaking of that, let's go to, oh gosh, Alan, you're going to need to call back on me. I'm sorry. I hit the wrong button on Alan. That's totally my fault. That's terribly unprofessional of me. I'm sorry. Got the new call screening system, and I'm just not used to the buttons. Oh, well. Okay. When Alan calls back, we will take him. Now, a couple other things that I need to bring your attention to. I've had on the program Stephen Gutowski. Stephen Gutowski is with The Reload, and he's been writing about David Chipman, the ATF former agent who is supposed to become Joe Biden's nominee to be in charge of the ATF. Well, his reporting has now gone mainstream, his racist comments and other things, and now this, according to the K-File at CNN, ATF nominee failed to disclose talks and events to a Senate committee, including speaking on politics of agents. He questioned a black agent on whether or not the black agent was competent, among other things. The Biden administration's nominee to head the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives failed to disclose some interviews and events dating back to 2012 on paperwork filed with the Senate. In one undisclosed 2019 talk given to a law firm titled, "Can the Right to Bear Arms Coexist with Gun Control?" David Chipman said his views in politics weren't typical of most at the ATF and in law enforcement because the groups were mostly, quote, a very conservative bunch, primarily of white men. The comments are notable because Chipman's nomination has struggled to gain support, even from some members of the Democratic caucus who have yet to commit to his nomination. Senators have questioned if his past record as an advocate of stricter gun control laws would make him a less effective director. He disclosed 30 pages of published written works, quotes and news articles, speeches, and testimony. The undisclosed talks and interviews were found online by CNN's K-File. This comes on the heels of the Reload documentation that he was known to make racist comments in the office and did not disclose his thorough work history outside of the ATF and his positions inside the ATF. His nomination is in trouble, thankfully. I'm sure the Biden administration will find someone else anti-gun. The difference between Chipman and whoever else they find who's anti-gun is that Chipman's been inside the ATF bureaucracy, so he knows how to navigate it more thoroughly than an outsider coming in, which is why you don't want a guy like Chipman, who is thoroughly anti-gun, to be in charge of the ATF. That would not be wise. When we come back, more of your phone calls, 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. Also, inflation is on the rise. It does not appear to be transitory, the word the Biden administration used to describe it. It's starting to wreak havoc in the economy. Hello there. It is Eric Erickson here. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. Now, I unfortunately pushed the wrong button earlier. I'm going to go back now to Alan and talk about nation building. Alan, sorry about that. My fault entirely.
Oh, no. It's too easy to happen. I appreciate you having me on, and as always, you have a great show every day. I know you got a lot of people holding, so I'll get right to the point. You know, the president put his hands on the Bible and said, preserve and protect, uphold the Constitution. This obviously is not protecting us because the Taliban, radical Muslims, they will always come for us because they hate us. And if we don't face that reality, in which we're not, and, you know, I'll admit I'm a supporter of Trump. I think he was completely wrong on this issue. He was thinking, it seems to me, and I don't know, how can I imagine, I mean, he was thinking about the money. The second point is nation building and cultural values. If we're not committed to staying somewhere for 50 years where they can have generations build up, you just can't throw money at a problem and solve it. It's too complex. The timeline is too long.
Yeah.
A third side point, my mother, my mother resettled refugees from all over the world. It's called IRC, International Rescue Committee.
Yeah.
And I remember her when we were going to go into Afghanistan the first time, and she resettled Afghans from back in the time of Charlie Wilson's war. So she knew them. She said, poor President Bush, he doesn't understand. These Afghan men are the most hard-headed men on the face of the earth. and my mother was an easygoing, mild-mannered woman. She was very tolerant and not judgmental. But, you know, it's what's going on, all the things you've listed are incredible. And yet people just voted for this stuff, and they couldn't see it coming. But it'll be interesting because, now I hope President Bush, former President Trump is learning something. He might, if his health is good enough, he might choose to run again. I hope he's paying attention to this because it's not always just about the money when you make a decision.
Look, that's well said, and thanks for calling back in. Very well said. Maybe we should have gone about it differently. Let me put it to you this way. Maybe we should not have invaded Afghanistan after 9/11, but let's not forget the history here. We know from the historic record, Al-Qaeda moved into Afghanistan, and the Taliban helped them, gave them aid and resources in order to plan the strategic attack of 9/11. We bombed Kabul a few days later when we realized what had happened, and we could not dislodge the Taliban. Not only could we not dislodge the Taliban, we had credible intelligence. Al-Qaeda had set up shop there. Thus, we needed to move into Afghanistan and rout out those who brought down the buildings. There was intelligence at the time. We now know it was wrong about Iraq, and we went in there as well. In Afghanistan, it was a very bloody, messy affair for a number of years, but ultimately, we were able to drive out the Taliban. Many of them went into the unpopulated regions of Pakistan. But while there, with an alliance with the Pakistanis, we were able to continue to keep them destabilized. The Pakistani situation deteriorated over time while Barack Obama was president. And Barack Obama began to signal that we weren't going to stay in Afghanistan indefinitely. Now, we could have left military, like we've done in Europe and in Asia after World War II. We could have left military installations in Afghanistan. They give us a foothold into the Middle East that we otherwise don't have in that part of the world to be able to combat Iran, terrorist regimes cropping up in the unsettled regions of Pakistan and the like, and even deal with China if we needed to. And Donald Trump decided to wind those things down. He wanted to, but he never actually got around to really doing it. He was convinced otherwise behind the scenes. But Joe Biden decided to go for it. Now, keep in mind, again, the caller earlier pointing out, Robert Gates, both George Bush and Barack Obama's defense secretary said, Joe Biden has been wrong about every foreign policy initiative in the last 40 years. And he has been. And he's wrong about this as well. And the result is Joe Biden just 2 months ago said the Taliban would not be able to sweep back into power, and he was wrong about that too. And here they are. And this is the problem. We had a mountainous desert region that was incapable of self-governance that we stabilized with 2,500 people, with no deaths of those people for more than a year. The Taliban left to have to deal with the Pakistanis, and now we've packed up and gone away, and they've moved right back in. And the Taliban will, through a force and violence we would never do, impose themselves on that region for however long, we don't know, and will provide a safe haven again for Al-Qaeda. We lost our focus and our mission, so yeah, we needed to find a way out of there. But the pack it up and leave it overnight thing clearly isn't working. And that's the problem. It's not that we're leaving, it's how Joe Biden decided to leave. That's the problem. Back to the phones we go. Ray, you're going to be up next. Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show, Ray.
Yes, I hate to say this, but Trump didn't realize, Biden didn't realize, nobody seemed to realize our 2,500 troops provided a backbone for an otherwise spineless Afghan army.
Yep.
When we withdrew the backbone, they collapsed because they have no spine without us being there.
You're right. And they're now an amoeba on the run from a Taliban that does have a spine. And that's it. They were able to police themselves and regulate themselves and govern themselves. However corruptly, they were still doing it as long as we maintained a presence, because they are deeply scared of the Taliban. And now that we're gone, they're collapsing because they have no spine. It is so unfortunate to see. And this is the problem. This is the problem. Are we going to have to go back? I suspect we will have to go back, because the Taliban don't respect us. They don't care about us. They view us as the great Satan. And they're the radicals, far more radical than Iran. Even the Iranians don't like the Taliban. The Taliban are so radical. This is a real and deep problem. 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. I'm going to go now to Ruth Mary, who's been waiting very patiently. Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show.
Good afternoon, Eric. I'm agreeing what you have to say about how we are leaving this country. I find it a little upsetting, but also, I mean, with the like you said, the Taliban is giving the women over to their soldiers, which is part of adding to the human trafficking, because it's against their will, just like the ones coming across the border. I think this administration reminds me of a book that I read when I was a child called The Ugly American. And I don't know if you're familiar with that book, but it had to do about our struggle against communists, but this can also refer to this administration, how they are ineptitude and bungling our diplomat or our U.S. Diplomat corps into from ignorance and not knowing the culture or how we're supposed to handle the situation. It's happening in every administration, but I think the way Joe Biden or President Biden has done this, I think it's a perfect example of what is mentioned in the book, The Ugly American.
He kind of is the prototypical one. Listen, I appreciate the phone call, and I think there's some merit to it. The idea that he knows, Joe Biden is a profoundly ignorant man, and he has been. Joe Biden in the 2000s proposed a division of Iraq into three portions, a Sunni, a Shiite, and a Kurdish portion, which sounds real good until you understand the way Iraq works, and there's no way it would have worked, because had you given the Kurdish a territory in northern Iraq, it would have provoked a war with Turkey, and everybody knew it except for Joe Biden. Joe Biden says a lot of things that just are not so. And he's now destabilizing that part of the world. A part of the world, by the way, that we shed a lot of blood to stabilize. We shed a lot of blood to stabilize it, and it got stable. And now it's not. And, you've got Jen Psaki of the White House. I'm sure you've heard this this statement, which is just absurd.
The Taliban also has to make an assessment about what they want their role to be in the international community.
The Taliban have to make an assessment about what their role will be in the international community, which is presuming immediately that they're going to take over and be back in charge. Presuming immediately. And at the same time, listen to the State Department.
Despite the accelerated exit, State Department spokesman Ned Price insisted yesterday the United States has not given up on the Afghan people.
Well, the message we are sending to the people of Afghanistan is one of enduring partnership. This is not abandonment. This is not an evacuation. This is not the wholesale withdrawal. What this is a reduction in the size of our civilian footprint.
It isn't abandoned. They're all going away. He can say they're not, but they're all going away. We're taking every last person out of there. This is an abandonment. This is so bizarre to have the State Department out there say we're not abandoning Afghanistan when we literally just committed 3,000 more troops to pull everybody out, and we're begging the Taliban to please don't blow up the U.S. Embassy. How naive do they think we are? Good grief. Tom, you're going to be up next on the program. Tom, welcome.
Thank you. I had a comment on the leaving. Back in the 2000s when I was in Iraq, we were training the Army and police force to take care of their own. Now that's 75%. They were gun-ho. That's that other 25% that as long as we were there, they were good. But as soon as we stepped back, they ran back too, which that's normal anywhere. But what scares the heck out of me is the equipment and technology we left behind that they got a hold of. China has been wanting for decades, but never got a hold of. Or some people call it, that would be leveling the playing field, which is something I really don't want to see.
You and me both. And for those of you who don't know what Tom is talking about there, we abandoned a bunch of modern high-tech drones, armored personnel carriers, tanks, and other things that we never got out of the way before the Taliban came in. And the Taliban are literally dancing in the streets with some of the microlight drones that we have. They will gladly hand them over to China to duplicate them. This is what has happened. I am not making that up. The pictures are all over the place. They're on CNN of the Taliban with our weaponry, which if we have to go back in, they will use against us. Deeply unfortunate. But this is where we are. The Biden administration has bungled this, and you will note the silence from Democrats on this because they know it. If you have allergies, you want these in your home. We even traveled with ours. Super for hotel rooms, too. Start with the 3-pack, depending on the size of your home. You might want another 3-pack. That's one of the testimonials on Eden Pure's website from an actual human being who ordered them. Clean air. Since I bought the 3-pack and brought it to work, everybody loves it. Now I'm talking about ordering or buying another 3-pack. Very surprised at how well the small units work. Noticed the difference almost immediately. I purchased the 3-pack and I'm happy I did. These are all comments on Eden Pure's website for their Thunderstorm. You can get the 3-pack right now. If you go to EdenPureDeals.com, you will see Eric Erickson with a green circle. You click me and you got the 3 deals again. And you scroll down to the bottom. You will see the Thunderstorm 3 unit, only $197. That's $200 off. What you do is you click buy now, it adds to your shopping cart, and then you put in the discount code ERIC3 at checkout. Click the apply button, and boom, you will get your Eden Pure Thunderstorms instead of $387, $187. They're filterless, they're small, they pack a wallop. You can get 3 of them, one for downstairs, one for upstairs, one for your RV, one for your basement, wherever you need them. The customers rave about them because they are that awesome. The Eden Pure Thunderstorm. Go to EdenPureDeals.com today. Get the 3-pack, save $200 using ERIC3 at checkout. That's your discount code. All right, I'm going to round out the phone calls in Afghanistan because I got a lot more stuff I want to talk about, and we do need to move on. There's other stuff happening out there. Right now, though, I want to go to Mark. You're going to be up next, Mark. Welcome to the show.
What's up, buddy? How are you?
Great.
I've been listening to everybody. I was there in 2010 in Afghanistan. I served for a year over there as a construction engineer before the surge, but Obama pushed all those people in. And I sadly have to say I think I disagree with you because there's not going to be a better time to pull out, man. We're dealing with an irrational enemy there. I mean, you've got guys coming at the most advanced technology-capable force. I mean, we've got more weapons that civilians don't know about that we use in these wars, and we're going up against guys that are coming at us with Soviet-era weapons. So I feel like as much as stuff as I've built that I've watched on TV get torn down or taken over by the Taliban, there's no better time than now. I mean, we're just wasting money there anyway, brother. What do you? Would you not agree with that?
Well, so I'm struggling to be definitive either way on this because I do think we're at a position where we clearly gave up the will to stay, starting with Obama signaling, and the Taliban have just been waiting us out. Concurrently, one of my concerns is that we're going to be in a situation in a few years where we're going to be fighting the Taliban again once they have a country to call their own because they're going to allow terrorist regimes to come back in. You're right. They're totally fanatical. And now they're going to be allied with China behind the scenes, and they're going to launch the dirty war against us that China can't do directly. It's very clear in exchange for their mineral resources in Afghanistan, China is going to set up the Taliban. And so if we could hold a country with 2,500 soldiers, which we were doing, is that worth it so China doesn't have one more stronghold on the world with the vast mineral resources that it can get and use to prop itself up? I'm inclined to say yes, but concurrently, we gave up a long time ago. The will of the people is to leave. The media did a terrible job. I only this week found out it was only 2,500 soldiers and no loss of life in over a year. It was only this week I learned that. And I try to stay up on the news. And the way we're getting out, and this is part of the problem, the way we're getting out, we're leaving behind weapon systems. We're rushing to get out, leaving behind weapon systems that now the Taliban are getting. Yeah, we had to do better. We had to do better. Listen, I'm going to move on from Afghanistan now and phone calls. It's an open line Friday. I realize that. If you're desperate to talk about it, I might get back to you. But there's other stuff we've got to talk about, including the fact that the World Health Organization leakers are now coming out and saying, yes, in fact, they did get bullied by China into covering up the sourcing. And also, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. It's no longer talking about pregnant women. It's talking about pregnant people. How can you trust an organization that has given into woke ideology over sound science? I want to talk about that with you when we come back. Across the nation today, the Eric Erickson Show, 877-973-7425 is the phone number this Open Line Friday if you want to chime in.
The McDonald's is food you buckle in with your seatbelt deal. And there's no reason not to take that extra precaution. Because a meal from McDonald's is not just a meal. It's often your most precious cargo. Enjoy a tasty double cheeseburger or a 6-piece chicken McNuggets for $2 each. Add any size soft drink like an ice-cold Dr. Pepper for just $1 more. Price and participation may vary. Cannot be combined with combo meal.
We build our lives piece by piece, and a great bank helps them take shape. When life has you on the run, bank quickly on the go. Spot your dream home? We'll help make sure you move in. When you're ready to turn your passion into a business, we'll help you pivot. No matter where you are, Northwest fits right in. With easy-to-use tech and down-to-earth conversation, we'll help you get there, one piece at a time. Northwest Bank, increasing the value of you. Member FDIC Equal Housing Lender.